Okay, welcome to Steal This Tesla. My name is Will. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be asking you a few questions. I have some different questions for you. They're not all about Tesla, and I'm gonna switch it up between different subjects to keep it, to keep you on your toes a little bit.
Okay, and so that everybody knows, I didn't see those. So whatever comes, there I am, right?
Okay, so I've been wondering this for a while. What was your first job?
What was my very first job? Oh, that's a while ago. So my very first job was when I was 4 years old. I helped my parents. My parents had a clothes store in the middle of nowhere in the Black Forest. And so I was obviously able to walk and talk at 4 years old. And they were doing their summer sales. And my mom said to me, "You can sell socks." And so I was selling socks. So that was my very first job at 4 years. And I loved that. And I think I've stayed a saleswoman for the rest of my life. My first real job was after my high school degree. My dad had skin cancer, and they were a bit worried whether he would get through that and whatever. So there was a need to take over that store. I had actually, I was thinking on studying business or whatever. And since I was the oldest of the family, they asked me to do what in Germany is called an apprenticeship. So when you have your high school degree, you can do that apprenticeship in a speedy manner, which took 15 months. So my first job was going to a store chain that's called Kaufhof, which is probably the Macy's of the United States. And I was going through this 15 months apprenticeship, selling sweaters, not socks anymore. I moved up from the socks to the sweaters, and did it in 15 months. And then that was that. And from there on, I studied 4 years bachelor's degree in business administration. That was good. And my dad was better, and I didn't need to take over the store. And I think that was probably the best thing that happened to me. That was my first store and my first job. And then my first real job after studying was at Deutsche Bank. I was on the trading floor for a year, trading currencies and doing arbitrages for corporate clients. Absolutely loved that. They thought I was doing a good job, so promoted me to fund manager, and off I was.
Awesome, awesome. Way
There
more
you
than
go.
I was expecting, but thank you.
Do you see
Um,
that from socks to sweaters to trading floor?
it's
Everything's
all
possible.
it's all sales, right?
It is, and it will always be all sales. It's all
Yeah.
selling. I always loved selling.
So my next question for you is, who taught you about saving money?
Who taught me about saving money? So first of all, I come from a region in Germany that's a little bit called like the Scottish. I'm from a region called the Black Forest, which is really the only pine trees, and there's not much there. It's beautiful, but very boring. And the people there are stingy. I mean, there's really lots of sayings about it being stingy. My parents were nice people, but not, spending money crazily. My grandparents even less. I was the oldest from that, so I don't think overly spending money has ever been an issue for me. And then once you earn a good salary, I mean, obviously with having lots of kids, lots of money passes by that, but I always had my little treasure. And then by being a fund manager, you understand how to evaluate different means of savings. And that's how it all started. So I always had my little savings account, my little investment account. And there were tough times in my life when I had to break it up and go down to zero. And then there were other times where I was able to build it up again.
Was there anybody in particular that you remember was maybe taught you stuff about saving money? Maybe there was like some early lessons that you had from somebody.
That's a good question. I mean, as a fund manager, you obviously go through rules that the banks impose on you. And that was the period, early 90s, that, Warren Buffett became really famous. And so we listened a lot to that. And I was actually already, my English was good, so I could help the Germans and French around me to understand those. So I did go through those lessons, and I found him quite fascinating at that moment. But I don't have one major figure that I followed. I'm quite independent. And then the first time in my life where really I felt it, I had a high conviction stock, not just a basket of stocks I appreciated, but that was actually only 3 years ago with Tesla. So the fact that I, moved all my money into one stock and stopped worrying, which is absolutely crazy. That's not me at all. I'm usually worried about my money. that was Tesla.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so this one's a little off topic, like I said. Do you play a musical instrument?
Oh, I do. I play the piano. So, like lots of German families, every kid had to learn an instrument. My brother was playing the violin. My sister later on also played the piano. So, yes, I did. And then, obviously, young adult, I had other things to do. And then I took it up again when the children were small because we taught them also to play piano. So, yes, and I still have a piano that I move around every time I move. So, yeah, I'm not playing now daily because piano is out of tune and I'm getting old about it. But it's actually funny whenever I have periods in my life, because with age comes that you have good periods and less good periods. But whenever I'm not feeling good, piano is actually a good remedy.
Awesome. Okay, what about a first concert? Do you remember
Oh
attending
yeah,
your
Tina
first
Turner.
concert?
When I was 18. When I was
Tina
18, I
Turner?
got for my and I remember it was in Mannheim in Konzerthalle. I completely remember all about it because I had my driving license. I could drive there for the first time. And because in Germany it's at 18 and we drove there, it was the most magical concert. It was Tina Turner, and that was it. And nobody will steal that away from me. I love that. Isn't that funny?
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. Um, I've never seen Tina Turner in concert. That would be an experience for sure.
She was great. She was absolutely great.
It's awesome. Which one did you prefer when you were in, let's say primary school? I don't know what you call like high school or middle
Yeah.
school. Um, uh, did you prefer math or language? I guess German or
Yeah, I was actually very good in English because my parents sent me at 15 for a year to North Carolina. That was a whole story, close to Asheville. That was an experience for somebody coming from the Black Forest. It was, far away and maybe a bit different in setting than I had imagined, but that was a learning curve. So my English was good. So I really enjoyed coming back to Germany, having English lessons, because that was just the easiest thing ever after you had been a year there. But I was always good in math. I was always very good in doing calculations. Now, where I usually stopped is, when it gets more complicated, and that's still true today. I was at the dinner table, we're just discussing, battery capacities. I mean, only Tesla people can talk about stuff like that at dinner table, right? But there you go. And I don't get it. And my husband, who is a PhD, who explains to me very patiently because he knows the quality of woman he has and how patient he has to be to try to explain or stuff like that. But there's just stuff I don't get, right? That doesn't mean I'm not useful in everyday life, but there is a level of depth into certain subjects, including math, where I'm no good at all. But I think where I'm very good is grasping the overall and conveying it. And that was true in math, and that was true in languages.
okay. German engineering. I don't know why I wrote it this way. Um, let me read it myself. Okay. In the German culture,
Mhm.
is there a legacy of engineering built into the culture?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you see the Audis and the way they talk in their own ads about the Technik durch Vorsprung or the Mercedes and all that, I think Germans are really good at technology. Now the thing is, they may be good at technology, but I don't think they're good at software. And I think that's what's coming up here now. We're having a phase, especially when we're talking about car makers, where technology as such, making them the highest performance ICE cars, or making the most beautiful mahogany inside interiors and whatever, had its time. And from one model to the next, you would straighten out the outside look, or you would have another cup holder, or I don't know what. All that had its time. But then the big switch to software, that's where it all got lost. And I think that's very typical for the Germans. Combining two technologies into one, that always has been a big issue. This is beautiful behind you with Starbase. You have to explain to us.
So this is Starbase. I'm about 5 miles away. The tower you can see right
I
there is
love it.
blinking. And I was hoping to get like a sunset, but it happened a little sooner than I expected, but hopefully the light's still okay.
It is still
Uh,
very good, and we can see the flash there. It's really beautiful. I
yeah,
love it.
and the lights on the tower, and they only started flashing about a month or 2 months ago. They started the flashing on the towers, so it's nice and
It's
visible.
very Eiffel Tower Paris now.
Yes, it's very beautiful. I love being able to see it. Okay, so my
So
next
you're
question.
sitting, wait. You're sitting on your terrace? That's your view every day?
This is actually my neighbor's terrace, but I'm only one house down, so I don't have as good of a view. But I just have to walk a couple houses down,
You
and this is
bribed the neighbor. I got it.
they're like never here. There's a lot of people that live over here that are like never home. So
Wow. So
yeah, but they let me
what
use the
made
Wi-Fi. So
what made you live there?
um, what made me live here? It was I've never seen a rocket launch in person. I've seen it from far away, a few hundred miles in Los Angeles, a lot of Falcon launches, a Falcon 9 launches, but I've never seen a rocket launch in person. And when he said he was going to catch a rocket,
Mhm.
I said I have to see this. I
You
have
mean
to
you
see this.
moved to California,
From
from
California.
California to Texas to sit it out now until that Starship finally
When I left, it was about 2 months, no, about three
two
months
weeks.
after.
I know it's always 2 weeks.
It was yeah, it was like 3 months after the last Starship test, and I
Yeah.
thought, and I thought everything was going to go through with the regulations and everything, and nothing went through, and here I am a year later.
So when you thought it was 2 months, you moved from California to Texas to live
Right.
there and watch it go up and be caught back.
And I thought by November, December I would see it, so I got here in
That was
October.
last year in September, so a
That
year
was
ago,
last
more than a
year.
year ago.
Yeah, a little more than a year ago, and now I'm still waiting. It's been a year, and I can't wait to see it. I haven't seen anything except for static fires. There's been no launches yet, so hopefully this coming month we're gonna get some sort of launch.
And then once that's done, you're moving away from Texas, or you're staying for the next one?
I don't know. I've grown to love it down here, so maybe I'll stay. I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, continue with the question. Sorry, I
Okay.
interrupted you.
This one, I actually have some, not experience, but I have some knowledge about this because I used to have a neighbor that was from Germany. And I was wondering about your opinion about German roads versus American roads. And I'm talking about the engineering, like the thickness of the roads, if you have any feelings about that.
I have no profound knowledge about it, but one thing that's for sure is driving is smoother in Germany than it's here. I mean, I can only talk about California and Nevada because I haven't driven on any other roads. Well, I have actually this week in a Nissan Pathfinder in Oklahoma, which was an experience as well. You know, that's the one thing. After years of driving a Tesla now, once or electric cars before that, once you get back into those ICE cars and they have no torque, there is nothing happening. You just think, my God, where are we? So in Oklahoma, the roads I didn't find were of good quality either. I don't know whether it's a question of thickness because I have no knowledge about it, but it does feel so much thinner and vulnerable, and all these holes and all this gravel that sits on them. I have the feeling in Germany roads are probably thicker but stronger in any case, also cleaner. I don't know who swipes them, but somebody must swipe them. They just have a good feeling. And I mean, you do know on the Autobahn, there is no speed limit, or at least in large parts of the Autobahn, there is no speed limit. When you get closer to towns and cities, there is. But so I do feel the roads are really in a better and smoother state. Is that the experience you had from your neighbor as well?
Yeah, and one thing he told me was that they don't just fill in a pothole, they replace sections of
Yeah,
roads in
they do.
Germany,
True.
which is sounds awesome.
That's true.
Because it makes a lot more sense to me. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, and
Um,
I also think they don't just cover it up. You know, here in California, sometimes I'm surprised parts of Santa Barbara are blocked because they just put a new layer on it, right? I mean, thin layer, but a whole new layer, and that's that. And then the year after, they start all over again. I mean, what a waste of money and time rather than doing it correctly straight away. And then obviously you have to do it in sections, of course, but you do it in a more stable way.
and when
But
you
then
do it
again,
in sections,
that's
then
actually maybe a funny experience. When I came from Europe, and all Europeans have this experience, you look at these houses, especially in California, that are, paper, right? Maybe a little bit of wood, but most of it is nothing. And when you're European, you just look at it and say, so where is your heating system? Oh, it's pumped there. And where, where is your water drains? And it just all looks so amateurish and cheap. But then when I had my first earthquake here a couple of years ago, I thought this is not stupid because these houses are so flexible. They remain much better in state. So maybe there is some reasoning to it. And I was a little bit quick in having a bad opinion.
Being from California, being a California native, born and raised, um, California's building standards are much higher than the rest of the country,
Mhm.
and because of earthquakes, and so yeah, there's a lot more give to the buildings in California. I don't know about other places, but the standards have started, just like car standards in California
Yeah.
spread to the rest of the country. The same earthquake standards
Mm.
have also spread. So yeah, there is a logic to it. Although I love the brick buildings in Europe.
Yeah, sure. So do you have a different type of buildings in Texas where you are? I've never put a foot in Texas, so I have no idea. Or is it comparable to California?
No, they're very the it, it reminds me of more like rural New York, like very old style housing uh out here. And then there's a lot of new houses going up in the area because of SpaceX.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I could compare it. Texas is growing, so there's a lot of new houses going up.
Build. And so where you live, there's a community. I mean, you seem so close to the launch center.
I live on a little island separated by a small bridge from the mainland in Port Isabel. And so it feels like it's only 5 miles away, but I actually have to drive almost an hour to get there because I have to drive all the way. This is what Elon Musk was talking about, where the island. I don't know if I can show you. Let me try. So yeah, you can see right over
Oh,
there.
yes.
That's South Padre Island, and it's literally only a few miles from Starbase over here.
So there's
But
water between those two. That's what you're
there's
saying?
yeah, there's some water between and a little bay, but literally, if I had a boat, I could almost go straight to Starbase. But I have to drive all the way around. Yeah.
I see. And so that's what he said when the Cybertruck will have some boat capacity, it is to be able
Yeah,
to drive through there.
it's a drive of 5 minutes versus a drive of an hour
Wow,
both
yeah, that
ways.
makes sense.
So an hour drive both ways, you're saving a lot of time. Well, I don't know if it is an hour. It doesn't necessarily take an hour both ways, but once you get all the way down into Brownsville, then you have to drive another like 20 minutes. It feels like maybe 30 minutes all the way to Starbase because it's at the very edge. It's actually an interesting story about where it's located, the Boca Chica beach, and I'm actually
Mhm.
working on a documentary right now with one of the locals to talk about that because that beach has been historically, you know, frequented by the locals since their grandparents and stuff, and it's a really interesting place
You
actually.
mean as a beach, as a place of leisure, right? Where they would go and
For fishing, there used to be sort of like a little tiny resort town over there, and then
Mhm.
it's also the distance between Mexico and that beach is so small that actually they said that they used to go down there and they would get robbed by people who would just kind of swim across, rob people, and then swim back.
Wow.
That's how there's barely any water. It's the Rio
No.
Grande Valley that goes between. It's a very
So
interesting
so
place.
I never looked this up, but so the US Mexican border is just right next to it?
Yes, yes. There's the Rio Grande Valley is technically the border, but
Mhm.
actually it actually goes over onto the American side or onto the Mexican side. So there's a little piece of beach on the Mexican side that is actually American land.
Oh, that must be
When I show it to you on a
never
map,
a dull story in America.
it's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah. So okay, my next question, which has to do with German and American roads. What was your first car
In America or in Germany?
well, let's start with Germany. What, like when you were a teenager?
Okay, so my first car was a 1984 Golf, orange color, and it burned. The engine burned. It was a fun story. I had it for about, let me check, probably a year. And I drove to school in the morning. I was living in a little town called Eichhalden, which was about 10 miles up in the mountains. And the high school was down in the valley. So I drove down in the valley. I arrived close to the school and suddenly, boom, there was the fire in front of my Golf. And I got out of the car and thank heavens there was somebody more intelligent around who told me straight away, get away, get away. And the whole engine started being in flames. And I think that was the moment I thought, I hope there's something better coming up one day. And there we are, we have something better now. And so that was the end of my first car.
I know you've told me that your kids, at least one of them, is very socially, I'm sorry, environmentally conscious,
Mhm.
and is into environmental type stuff. I'm wondering your history, maybe in college, maybe you had some days of environmentalism where you were very
It's a,
idealistic.
yeah. I mean, I was never a social warrior. I was never associated with these people, you know, Greenpeace or whatever. It always sounded suspect to me. And like I've told earlier, I was always a saleswoman, right? And so my whole attitude has always been rather than, you know, let's make money or let's make something out of it or let's sell something, which was obviously completely contrary to all these social warriors. Nothing against them. It was just a different world. And so yes, for my 5 children, especially my 2 girls, are much more social warriors in all senses. I think they would love ESG, contrary to their mom. And so why I mean, I feel we're actually living very environmentally conscious. You know, we compost or we have electric cars or we're very careful with water usage. Even before we came to California, we had solar already in our home in France much earlier than everybody else. So I think we were always doing it, but not fighting for it politically. You know, for us, it was just something that we would implement in the family. I also remember for one of my children, I had my face where I didn't want any plastic diapers. That didn't last long, but I tried. So I had my periods where, you know, I tried stuff, but it was never linked to any activism. My activism was always more commercial, right? I always tried to change the world by selling them something or by doing something that had a commercial goal. But I do believe in our private lives, we're quite, you know, my husband goes to farmer markets at least twice a week. We always try to support the locals that do something, you know, rather here than getting it shipped from Amazon or whatever. So we're trying it in our everyday life, but there wasn't any activism related to it.
So no chaining yourself to a tree or anything of the
Didn't do
sort.
that. Didn't put any tomato sauce on any paintings. I mean, nothing like that. No.
Okay, okay. So in businesses that you've worked in, um, did you notice when you were first starting to work in corporations anything about governance that was shocking to you, or I don't know, a lot of companies I've worked at ended up, you know, not laundering money. What's the word? What's the word when owners of businesses like steal money? I forget. There's a word for it. Not laundering. They
I
what
don't
word?
know.
No. They use a word for it. I'm trying to think of it right now. When basically like frauds, like Nicola.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. Well, I think Nicola was less a fraud in terms that they, you know, were cheating the tax code or whatever. I think Nicola was more a fraud in terms of what they promised shareholders that they knew already wasn't true, right? Which is obviously an SEC issue. I mean, I worked in banks where overview was quite high. And then funnily enough, so my first job was at Deutsche Bank, and Deutsche Bank has been in all the scandals since then, right? So when you're a little employee, I mean, I was a little employee, but I wasn't high up the ladder either. You don't realize you're not associated to these things. And we were in Paris, the headquarters was in Frankfurt. So that was not of our thing, but I still laugh because a couple of weeks ago came out this story that Deutsche Bank New York would help Trump, obviously is now under investigation. And I just feel like this is so funny that this happens to former employers of you, because when you are the employee, you have to sign all these compliance documents, and you have to promise all this and this and that and that. And then 20 years later, they're still mingled to all the scandals. And then my second employer was then Commerzbank, now it's UBS, but at that moment it was still Commerzbank, so about the same story. Moody's was a different story. Moody's, I hope one day to be liberated from the NDA that still, I think, has me, because there are a couple of things I really would like to talk about for the rating agencies. Nothing to do with Tesla, but there are some crusty stories to talk about. And then from then on, I had my own companies. So thank heavens there were no issues then. I don't hear you. I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry. I tried to fix my lighting here. I hope it's a little better.
It's good. We see you.
Okay, good. Yeah. So there's always some stuff in business that you can't get away from. This in everything, there's good people and bad people, obviously. So my question is, your first concepts of the stock market and the bond market, maybe pre-working inside of the industry, when you were maybe in high school or college.
Yeah. I didn't have a very early understanding of stocks. I'm always amazed when we talk with our Twitter followers and family, how people would have at 12 years old their first stocks because their parents helped them buy it or whatever. That wasn't my case at all. So for me, it really started when I got into banking, and it was initially obviously bonds, because they don't let you get into stock first. And when I was looking at bonds, I found that when that's your initial take of it, I found that very fascinating until the second I got to stock. And once I put my hands in stock, I never looked back. I mean, even today, I'd rather go back into currencies, because as I explained, my first job was really currency trading and building currency arbitrage models for corporate clients. So meaning, and maybe we should discuss that, because the other day I had a little discussion with somebody on Twitter on that. When you have foreign exchange risk, you purchase or you construct cars in China, you sell them in China, but you also bring them to Europe. You have fluxes of money in Chinese currency, in euros, and obviously in US dollars. And so depending on how they fluctuate, you can make a loss or a gain that has nothing to do with you, just because the currency market. And you can hedge these. You can hedge these by forward purchases, or you can hedge them by a couple of things. And that was my first job. That's what we did. We talked to these companies and said, so what's your risk? What risk do you want to cover? Do you want to leave half of it open or whatever? And then whatever they put in place, it could have been an interest rate risk. It could have been a pure currency risk. Our job, we were called the liquidity group, was to find them the right arbitrage to hedge that risk. And that was very interesting. So I was about 24 then, and slowly moved up the ladder in doing that. But it was an interesting thing. And it's actually at certain moments of the market quite cheap to hedge your risk, and then at others it's very expensive. And it was an interesting moment as well, because that was in 1990, beginning of the 1990s, where Europe still had multiple currencies, and where sometimes, and obviously the major currency was the Deutsche Mark for Germany, and other currencies like the Italian lira or the French franc devaluated their currencies to win, well, some oxygen compared to the Deutsche Mark in their local markets. And that was interesting, because when you're a young trader and you start with that, and you wake up one morning, you go to your work in your trading room, and then suddenly the currency has devaluated. That brings some juice to it. And that's the moment you don't go back to bonds, because I mean, bonds is all good and nice, and if you deal in 10 or 30-year-old bonds, you have a good leverage, but it has nothing to do with the excitement that you can get out of currencies and stocks.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I have another question, and I think I'll skip to that one because you brought it up. The bond market seems to move slower than the stock market, even though it's traded. The bonds are traded, right? So can you maybe do you understand why? Maybe, I mean, obviously there's a reason why there's not, I mean, because there's not as much volume, but you would think that there would be some uh, some speed to bond trade or bond volatility that you don't
Yeah.
see.
Well, I mean, obviously, interest rates are an anticipation of what happens economically or not. Bonds is actually a very useful tool. It's a very useful tool for states to get debt, right? To issue more debt and get money, and also for companies. A company that needs debt, let's look at GM, they do their financing for their auto loans themselves. So they need to get that money from somewhere. So they issue a debt, they issue a bond, a 3-year bond, a 5-year bond, a 10-year bond, and that allows them to get money out of the market. So you have two underlying factors that get into it. You have the yield curve from 3 months to 30 years. Usually it is in a normal shape. Currently it's not, it's getting inverted. And that is an anticipation of rates and needs for debt, right? Because if you think the market needs more debt in 3 months, well, the interest rate rises. And then to that, you add the spread of the credit worthiness of that issuer. And that brings me to credit ratings. Not sure you wanted to talk about credit ratings, but there you are. So if you have somebody, let's say GM, who has a certain investment grade rating, you add a certain spread to it. For GM, I think it's at the moment 1.5%. So if they would like to issue a 10-year bond, they would look at where's the yield curve now. It's at 4%. They have a 1.5% spread. So if they would issue a fixed rate 10-year bond issuance, they would have to pay 5.5% or more or less to find buyers for that, right? And that's where the credit rating gets into play. I mean, then there's also something called credit default swaps. That's something else, but those spreads are heavily marketed. And the spreads also obviously are not only dependent on rating agencies, thank heavens, but also on the market's view on this particular issuer. But it is the most common way and the most cheap way for an issuer to get to cash, because there are people who want to invest, especially funds, because they have all these assets under management, they need to get it somewhere. And you have all these companies that need debt, and this is the way they can meet, rather than adjust it via stock or whatever else, or going for a loan, which would cost them much more.
Okay. So you would probably, I'm getting from what you're saying that the lack of volatility in bonds is a feature, not a bug. Is that?
Yeah, it's a more stable market, because we're talking obviously a couple of tens of percentages going up and down. It has a major impact because they're so long. I mean, if you can feel it if you do a 30-year mortgage. Having a 6% mortgage or a 7% mortgage will give you a completely different monthly repayment. Well, the same thing happens for a bond issuance. So they try to issue bonds when rates are low. That's why you had so many bond issuance when the rates were so low. Now that they're going up, they try to issue less, hoping they come down again. So that's one factor. But then on the other side, you have the factor that there's a possible recession and people need money. Companies need money, so they will issue no matter how expensive it is, right? They may then go for variable rates, hoping they come down. There is a whole theory to it, what you should issue when, but there is always a reason for companies to need money. There is no doubt about it, especially if those companies are not as cash rich as Tesla is.
Great. Okay. Let me move back up a little bit. And you already touched on this subject about the area of Germany that you were from. But my question is are Germans an especially frugal people in general, the German people?
I think they're prudent, and that comes with it. I mean, I call it rather stingy than frugal, but let's be polite here. And I also think, home ownership has a higher rate in Germany, or had a higher rate in Germany. Car ownership had a higher rate. I was very surprised initially when I came to the United States long ago, how many cars were leased, right, rather than purchased, because in Germany, there was this old mentality. I mean, I've been gone now for 10 years, so maybe it changed, and from Germany, I've actually been gone for nearly 30 years. But there was this mentality of, you don't buy anything until you have all the money to do it. Compare that to the United States, that obviously is not the case.
Definitely. Okay, so this is about the economic situation. Does this economic situation that we're currently in, does it really compare to the past in what in comparison to our parents and our grandparents? Are we kind of spoiled in comparison because they've gone through really hard times, and maybe we are seeing this as one of the worst type of economic situations? But
yeah, well, I mean, first of all, we're going through the first pandemic in more than 100 years. So none of our parents have seen a pandemic. And I think this was a quite traumatic situation. And I actually think it was a more traumatic situation for our children, for the 2 to 20-year-olds who were really robbed of a large part of their life. So and us adults, we have the obligation to help these kids now, get back into a real life as soon as possible. But in terms of economy, I'm very puzzled, and people should know that the two of us actually exchange quite a lot by DM for months now, and how many times we have actually, been discussing that. One day you think we're in a recession, and the next day you have another economic indicator, and you're just like, what recession? Where are we, right? Or it's just, I think this is the craziest recession. I've watched a couple, right? This is the craziest recession I have, because the job market is holding up quite well. But on the other hand, we all know not everybody went back to have a job, right? There are so many people now living off their Etsy jewelry business or working from home for some employer somewhere else on this planet. And so behavior has changed a lot. And I don't think the job market can be evaluated with the old measures as it was before. Inflation has been there. The supply chain issues have clearly been there, but how long will that last? I don't think it will last much longer. I think it will come down very quickly. So I was, as you know, the last 2 days in Oklahoma. That flight from Santa Barbara to Dallas at 4:30 in the morning was packed. There was not one seat left, right? And then the second flight was from Dallas to Oklahoma. You would think nobody in the world would go at 10 in the morning from Oklahoma to Dallas, from Dallas to Oklahoma. It was packed as well, and the two flights back on Friday the same. So people seem to be traveling. I was in Vegas a month ago. The hotel was overbooked. There was no room left. So people seem to be spending. If I go into stores here, there seems to be more people ever spending money. So I just don't feel the recession yet. If it will come, it may come hard because people seem so little worried about it. I hear people talking about the poorer classes feeling it badly, and I can imagine if you have a gas car in California and it costs you $6 a gallon to fill your gas up, I think you feel it, but I don't see it having a real impact today yet. It's the most bizarre recession, if that's the word, that I've seen ever, right?
Well, that's the funny part is, I was working and lived through 2008 recession. And, to me, that felt like a depression. People were losing work and, people were losing houses, and it was real rough. And they kept saying it was a recession. And everybody kept saying, this is a depression, not a recession, right? But if this is a recession, that makes more sense. I think I think we gave that name recession to 2008, and now people are confused.
You're right.
They think that's a normal recession. That
and you're right, probably, that we've been so hard hit in the GFC that today seems softer, and it also seems softer because there's still so much liquidity left from the pandemic time. So it's a weird situation. And where I give it to you as well, yes, house prices are coming down, but they've shot up so much that the sellers of today's now a little bit lower prices are still making a lot of capital gain, right? So for really getting to the point where people will not be available, or will not be capable of reimbursing their mortgages, I think we're far to go. They have mortgages that they did at 3%, right? Or they refinance at 3%. So at the moment, giving up even 10 or 20% from their initial asking price doesn't, I mean, of course it hurts, but doesn't hurt them financially to the point. And I don't see foreclosures. I think we discussed that before, that I'm looking, at the Las Vegas market to eventually buy there. I don't see foreclosures shooting up. I mean, there may be random foreclosure from time to time, but there's no major market for foreclosures yet.
Definitely. Okay, my next question is, so you worked in real estate as a real estate agent. So when real estate prices deflate, or when they go down in price, when houses go down in price, or when they go up in price, um, somebody is helped by that. Somebody always benefits depending on if it goes up or if it goes down, right? If housing prices go down, obviously that helps
Buyers.
helps buyers. If they go up, somebody must be helped. Is that because the real estate agents get bigger commissions, the brokerages get bigger commissions, but they lose on
That's a
volume,
cute question. I mean,
right?
when you're a real estate agent, what's your major goal is doing it quickly. So no real estate agent would ever go to a client and think, okay, if I can price this $500,000 higher, then I get 6% or 3% of that $500,000 more. No real estate agent thinks like that. The real estate agent thinks, okay, if I get this mandate 200,000 lower and sell it in 5 hours, I got certainly a little bit less commission, but it's quickly done. Time is much more of essence to a realtor than getting the extra little percentage. I mean, if you get it, you're not going to cry about it, but if you put it at too high a price, you will have to sit it out for a long time. And there's a golden rule in real estate: never put a house too high initially. You're going to pay it double and triple by the time you have to bring it down to the real market value, especially in the current market situation. So I don't think there's any realtor today, no matter where in the United States or in Europe, that is going to overprice a house with the expectations to maybe have a couple of bucks more in a commission. They rather undercut it a little bit to make sure they get it out of the system as quickly as possible.
But there is some benefit to the housing market rising to somebody.
Well, it's not rising because realtors want it to rise. It was rising because demand rises. When you're in a market where suddenly you have 5 buyers bidding for a house, well, that house will be sold at a higher price, and that is then the anchor point for the whole neighborhood, because that's the last sale. And then suddenly all the other prices adjust because house number 1 was sold at a higher price, so everybody adjusts. And then for the next 5 houses, there are again more buyers, and house number 2 will sell even higher, and everybody else puts it up. So prices rise not because a realtor wants to raise them. That's not the thing. It is because the anchor point, the most recent sale in the neighborhood, it has been at a higher price. And that's always an issue, or that's always the consequence of more buyers wanting the same houses. And that's what happened during the pandemic, right? Once the initial shock was over, people could visit again. I mean, with all the sanitary restrictions that we know, they realized they didn't want to stay in San Francisco or whatever. They wanted to move to wherever it was easier, cheaper, more comfortable to live. And that's where people moved to Vegas, to Austin, to Colorado, and I don't know what, and came, that's the other phenomenon. When you have buyers that come from California, where they sold their house for $2 million and now move to an area where the houses are at 800,000, for them to put 100,000 more on the table because they want that house and now and quickly. But then what happens is now suddenly this neighborhood is worth not 900,000, right? And the next guy comes from California, he sold it also at 2 million, but he can put down $1 million. And there you got a 20% increase or 25% increase in a couple of sales.
So the reason I brought that up was because I want to relate that to bonds and to currencies. You said you worked in currencies also. So, there's more buyers of USD, of the US currency. So
Yes.
the price rises just like houses.
Well, that's a bit double tranched. You got higher interest rates. And so if somebody wants to put their cash somewhere and you get 3.5% in US dollars, would you rather put it at 3.5% in US dollars or at 1% in euros, right? And so when you do that, so this is always the thing, that everything is in a circle. Higher interest rate brings more interest, so the currency goes higher brings higher interest rate, which brings, there you go. And so you're flowing it around. So it's very difficult to pinpoint what's the beginning of it, but you very quickly see how the spiral works. But obviously it then has an impact on exports and imports, and that's where the spiral can turn. So usually there's a reality check that brings it back to a balance until the day it doesn't.
This is sort of back to the bond market.
Okay.
When you worked in the bond market, was there a busy season?
There was a busy season every end of quarter in the good old days. I think that's less true now because my clients and me, when I was a fund manager, we had the same publication dates, which was also the case for mutual funds in Europe, in the USA for a long time, meaning you would publish on end of March, end of June, end of September, and end of December your portfolio. And the 90 days in between, nobody outside of the bank or of the fund management company would know what you're doing, right? So during those 90 days, you did what you thought was the right thing, but then you do portfolio cleaning up and just, you know, window dressing, we call it technically, to put it back to its benchmark or to put it back to something presentable. And that's true for equity and for bonds, because I was at one moment in charge of equity funds, of balance funds, and of currency and bond funds. And you always try to make sure that at the end of the quarter, they looked the way it is. And that brings a lot of flux with it. Because if you, for example, I hated treasury bills, I always did, just think it's most expensive, useless thing. But obviously at the end of the quarter, you wanted to have treasury bills rather than any corporate short bonds or whatever. So there was always an uptick in volume for these moments. This is less the case now with ETFs, because ETFs have to publish daily. So this whole window dressing issue is still not there. But you have now, for a couple of years now, they have introduced ETFs that only publish at the end of the quarter as well, trying to be the best of both worlds, right? So that seems to come up now, just because, so you have the cheaper fees of the ETF, but you have the non-transparency of the mutual funds.
Bond rating agencies' relationships with market makers.
Oh.
So I mean, I know I don't want to talk about it, you know, specifically to your situations, but you know, just in general, is there a coziness? Do they play golf together? Do you know what I mean? Like, are these people not separated by as many walls as one might think?
No, rating agencies have everything to lose. To the sense, and I explain a little bit. They're making horrendous amount of money, right? Oh, let me do a little parenthesis. Sorry about this. Earlier you said realtors, will they push the price up for currency? No, realtors want to sell quickly. There is no doubt about it. What's the realtor's worst case scenario? It's a moment where the buyers don't want to buy and the sellers don't want to sell, right? That's the moment where you as a realtor, you're just stuck because you don't make any commission on anything. The same thing happens for fund managers. BlackRock, I looked at the other day, they have a real issue because they're, a real issue at very high level. I think they're still making 3 or 4 billions, but let's just call it what it is. They are making on their ETFs a percentage on the outstanding funds. I think it goes from 0.10% to 0.40%, whatever. Stock is down. I mean, we know from the ARK funds, which is a good example, that they were at one point at $150 and now they're at $30. So what happens is at $150, ARK gets, I think it's nearly 1% of the fund volume as management fees for the year. When it's at $30 or $34, where it was lately, well, they only get 20% of that, right? So the management fees for all these fund managers goes down with it. So getting back to the rating agencies, a rating agency is paid on 2 bases. One is a fixed price for doing the job, and the other one is a variable rate that is linked to the bond issuance for which this rating is used. So when there is no bond issued, let's talk about Tesla, they don't get anything, right? So when the market is at very low interest rates, rating agencies should make little money, but thank heavens they found ESG, so now they're making money on ESG. But you see what it is. So they are very happy that rates go up. But are they at the origin of rates going up? No, they're not. And I don't think there is a let's play golf together relationship. I mean, when I was on both sides, it was cordial. You met for the meeting, you had lunch together because it was a full day of work. But that was it. It wasn't going further. You wouldn't get Christmas presents from these people. They wouldn't know your children or whatever. It's nothing personal in those relationships. And usually rating analysts are not the most fun type of people. I think that's why it wasn't my cup of tea, but there you go.
So did you work on Wall Street specifically?
I mean, my main office was in Paris, but the Moody's New York office was in Church Street, and I was weeks and months on Church Street. It depended on what missions we were, but most of the time I was based in Rue Aubert in Paris.
Okay, and what was your experience with living, or not living, but being in Manhattan? What, you know,
It's funny.
sort of.
I lived. We had Moody's had a quota of rooms reserved in the Hilton Church Street because I was just next door. So I had one of those. I mean, nothing fancy, I can tell you about that. And it was tough because I had young children at home. And so last thing you want to be is being stuck in a cheap Hilton next to your employer. So all you could do is just go next door, work, and in your cubicle. It was still the good old gray cubicle time. So I mean, I love New York, but now in hindsight, it was really not fun. You know, when you can live in Santa Barbara or before that on the Côte d'Azur in France, and you remember that you were for months stuck in New York, it's okay. I'll do without it next time.
Yeah, I lived in New York for a while, and you should definitely enjoy being there for a little while. But I don't know if I could ever live there. You know, at least not
What
in
age were
Manhattan.
you when you were in New York?
How old was I? 25 to 27 or so.
Yeah, I think that's the right range to
I
be
think
there.
so
I was
too.
there a
Yeah.
little bit later, I would say. Let me check. What was that? I always think compared to the age of my children. So he was born 97. Yeah, early 2000s. So I was about 34. And, you know, you have 3 kids at home. The earlier you're back in that plane and you get out of it, the better it is. And I was never this this party girl that would go out for cocktails at 7 in the evening, whatever, because I had work to do. And so it was a bad city. I didn't hate
Right.
it, but it wasn't my preferred city.
You know, New York in comparison to Los Angeles, because I, you know, it felt alive. The city is so many
Yeah,
people, and there's something very organic about
true.
being
The
there
energy. Yeah.
that I loved. You know,
Mm.
I loved that part of it. But I think it's for visiting.
Yeah. A couple of days and then that's good, right?
Yeah, yeah. Everybody should live there for a little while, but then just for visiting.
Yeah.
Um, okay, I'll move on to this part now. Uh, we'll be quick. 10 things you love about California.
10 things. Oh my God, 10. Okay. The weather, the beauty of Santa Barbara, the beaches. Um, it's gonna be difficult. The Whole Foods, the farmers market. Oh my God, the Teslas. I'm suffering. Um, Stop. I'm out.
Okay, we'll come back to that another time. Okay, 10 things you love about Germany.
Um, okay, I love certain German food, no doubt about it. Obviously, I love my parents, my family. I think the nature is beautiful there. I love winters in Germany. There's just so much, you know, good snow, whatever. I love Munich. I think Munich is a beautiful city. Love the different dialects. Love the beer. Oh, actually, my husband bought me the Costco calendar with the beers in them, you know, the 24 different German beers. I absolutely love that. Um, I love the Autobahn and driving quick there without having to worry. And I think I love the train system. I mean, I hear people now complaining that it's not so punctual anymore, but in the good old time, it was punctual.
I'm sure it's better than the Amtrak in California. I can promise
Yeah,
you
that's
that.
true. You see.
Although I did love taking the Amtrak from Santa Barbara down to LA.
Oh, the Pacific Liner, right? Isn't it
I would
beautiful?
I would take it up to see my brother up in San Luis Obispo, and then back down to Los Angeles all the time. And it was rarely used. I was like alone on the train. You
Yeah.
know, it was wonderful.
And the site
Um,
is just so wonderful, isn't
but
it?
it takes forever, and it's always late. So,
Yeah, that's true.
but it is beautiful. Um, 10 things you love about France.
Oh, that's the easiest. So that's the food, no doubt. The wine, no doubt about it. I could have put the wine into California as well. The climate in the south of France. I absolutely love Paris. I love the Eiffel Tower. I love the childcare system. I absolutely love the childcare system. If there's one thing from France that I could bring to America, that would be my motivation. I love the healthcare system. I mean, it's probably not in quality as good as it is in the United States, but it's free and it's just really the good way of handling it. I love that there are no guns. I have a problem with the guns here in the United States. Oh, if Warren ever sees this, it's going to kill me, but that's all good. I do love the cheeses, all that, the regional food there, and absolutely love the farmers. The farmers in France, they know how to preserve their land, their food, and everything. You see, there's lots of food in there.
France was a really easy one for you, I can
It
see.
is, and I could have probably gone on for 20 more. I love France, but it was time to leave.
Um, I don't know if I should ask. Okay, I'll ask this one. We can edit it out if you don't like it. Uh, 10 things you love about being motherhood, being a mother.
10 things I love being about a mother. Um, I mean, this is going to be funky. I love, I don't know whether people understand it. I love giving birth. I think it's the most magical thing there is. I love breastfeeding. There's something very animal and basic about it that I really love. Um, I'm not a very patient mother, but I love the moments where there's a real good discussions with my children. I love seeing them moving out of the house. Not that I'm anticipating them moving out, but I just love having this feeling that I've given it all and they're ready to fly by their own. I love helping them, with schoolwork and all that. There's no doubt about it. We obviously made them all very good eaters. They all love good food. I love setting up companies for them. I think I've done so many of them. I absolutely love that. Um, I love cutting the hair of my boys. I'm actually a good hairdresser for my boys' haircuts. I mean, not that they let me do it very long, but these years. Um, I love understanding how the genetics of the parents, mirror in the children. Um, I just love my children. I'm sorry. That's number 10.
That'll work. That'll do it. Uh,
Thank you. 10
10
is
things.
tough.
This is the last two. The last two. 10 things you love about Tesla.
Oh, Elon, the employees, the S, the X, the Y, and obviously the three, the torque, the software, hopefully soon FSD, that I'm chicken with the FSD still, and then robotaxis. That was easy. I could have
Wonderful.
probably done more. That was good.
What? Oh, 10 things you love about Elon Musk.
10 things about Elon Musk. Oh. I mean, first, he's a genius, no doubt about it. Second, he's really funny. There's nobody that is as funny than he is. Uh, Third, and I actually love it, he can drive me crazy. And that actually puts me to the brink that I say, maybe he's right, because he's obviously more right than I'm right. So it puts me in question. So I love it, even though it first drives me crazy. Fourth, I love his vision. How few people are they that go so far in their vision? I have problems visioning what I'm doing tomorrow or next year, and he goes out into space and thinks so much about it. I love that he's not afraid to be unpopular. I love that he is outspoken for causes. that he's convinced is right, even though he may not. I love that he brought us Tesla. I love that he's buying Twitter. I absolutely love that he's buying Twitter. Thank you, Gary. You're gonna hate me for that one, doesn't matter. I really like that he is so dedicated to the cause. I think this man has having no private life or nearly no private life for the betterment of humankind. And I love that he made so many children.
That's 10. Okay. Who or what made you aware of the Tesla community on Twitter?
That's a very good question. How did that start? I think it all started on YouTube. I think I must have seen a YouTube video of Warren or of Stephen Mark Ryan, you know, ones of the ones that are usually up there. And the YouTube algorithm must have found that with all the cookies crawling around my computers. So once I had that, I followed those links and I was on Twitter, and then I reactivated an old account because I had an account that I had active long time ago when I moved to the United States, right? Because you do a Facebook account, you do a Twitter account, whatever. Then I was a long time, and changed my name and became the TeslaBoomerMama, and that was that.
Okay. These are a little bit longer questions. I don't know if you still
Oh,
have time.
more! Oh my gosh, let's go.
Okay, you still have time. Okay. Um, when FSD, when full self-driving is shown to be much safer than any human, will you trust it to drive you around at least on city streets?
I have a deal with Omar, because Omar knows how chicken I am. And I said to him, because he's obviously driving it all the time, said, Omar, you tell me when it's ready for me, because I think he understands. He must have, I don't know whether his mother is the same or whatever, but he knows I'm chicken and I don't want to be in a situation where I lose control over it. And so the deal is, when Omar tells me now you subscribe, I did subscribe once for a month, and I wasn't comfortable, and I was very outspoken about it. Not that, you know, I don't want to criticize it, but I just can't do it. And so the deal is, Omar will give me green light, and at the moment I don't have green light. And when I have it, I put it on, and he better wait until the last moment so that it works.
Okay, so this is along the same lines. And this is a little bit more of a somber note. Uh, Full self-driving will probably have accidents, where where FSD ends up being responsible, being the cause of somebody losing their life possibly. Are you comfortable knowing that someone may die because FSD failed, if it means hundreds of thousands or millions of other people's lives are saved? Is this like traffic lights? You know, sometimes traffic lights cause accidents if they malfunction, but the lives they save make up for it in an order of
Yeah.
magnitude.
Yeah, or like the safety belt, right? It just is what it is, and I think humans have to be conscious of there may be a price to pay. Would we all prefer that there will never be accidents? Of course, and I really hope they get it to the point, and I do believe the system they're putting in place is going to be so much safer than any human can be. But does that mean it is 100%? Probably not, right? What is difficult in this subject is obviously, first of all, accepting that there will be fatalities, but the second is how to best communicate that. And I do believe we're not there. I think us Tesla fanboys and fangirls understand it. We're hearing it enough, but the general public has no idea. The general public will be very surprised how safe it is once they get a glimpse of it. But I don't think there's enough communication at the moment about even there will be limits. And these limits are better than the current situation, but there will be situations where even that system will fail. But I do believe they're doing such a good job, it will really be very marginal.
You know, it makes me think of it's difficult to find a comparison. We talk about elevators, automatic elevators, and how
Yeah.
somebody manually used to do it, and they would cause injuries and
Mm.
fatalities. Often it was well known that it was dangerous.
Yeah.
And automatic elevators were less dangerous, but obviously the first ones were not the safest, and they
Yeah.
got safer. They got safer over time. Um, from what I've seen, I think full self-driving will end up being much safer than even that
Mm.
transition. I think the transition will be even safer because of the safety aspect, the way that it's basically like bumper cars, but virtual, bumper
Mm.
cars.
I
I don't
have
know.
I have one subject that comes up from time to time, and I have no solution for it, but I just throw this out now, which is privacy rights of people. I mean, even during this COVID phases, so many people didn't want to take the vax because of this or didn't have a stance, whatever. Lots of times privacy rights came up. So once you have a robot taxi, same issue actually with your phone, right? With your phone, you're traceable, you give away your location, it tells you how was your restaurant, whatever, right? There's a lot of interaction that maybe you granted or maybe you weren't even aware that you granted. So will this robot taxi suddenly know more about us? Can there be somebody influencing the robot taxis? Can there be somebody programming the robot taxis to now suddenly all drive off the cliff or whatever, right? Is this safe in all aspects? And is our data and our usage of it safe and not usable? So, but I have no answer to that. It sometimes, just
I
spins in my head.
I I expect I expect the robotaxi network to be much like the Boring Company network that they've installed for the Las Vegas Loop,
Yeah,
where they have the ability to hit a kill switch of sorts if any of the cars go, in any direction they're not supposed to, or if something goes wrong. I think they're going to have a way to stop the vehicle from moving, immobilizing it.
yeah.
Um, that's the only safe way is to say, okay, our do we see it doing, and I think it might even be controlled by artificial intelligence the on the
Highest level.
on the highest level, maybe on the network, meaning that
Yeah.
it's connected over Wi-Fi or 5G or something most of the time, unless it's in a rural area. And if it notices
And
it
there
doing
it could be stalling, right?
well, if it notices that it's acting erratically, that they
Mhm.
could say, okay, this vehicle is acting wrong. It's not acting norm within spec. You know what I mean? Or within what it's used to seeing. So I think there's definitely ways of noticing problems before they happen.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think, I mean, from my experience with software. Um, Okay, so let's move on to Tesla stock. I know I haven't really talked about Tesla stock yet. So what do you think is stopping whales from wanting to own or wanting to own more Tesla?
In the short term, I think it's a combination of still macro uncertainties, Fed raising rates, Ukraine war, China. I think China political unrest is still a subject. Where's China going? I don't know whether you've seen what happened last night and at the China Parliament and Parliament or whatever you call it, that big convention. I know. You just wonder, and I always wonder, this China COVID policy. Is this all true? Is this all manipulation? I have no grasp. I don't know China. But they're so important now, and we need to look into it. So those are three macro elements, and then there's obviously the Twitter overhang, and there are still people who don't understand Tesla. Tesla, if you're not driving a Tesla, if you're not in this Twitter sphere, if you're not watching these videos from morning to night, if you haven't understood the company, you just see this car and you see more and more cars, but you don't get it. You just wonder, why is this worth so much more than GM? Why is this so much more worth than Daimler? And I'm writing this article, trying to write this article to Warren Buffett, and it's not easy to convince a value investor who wants cash, who wants dividends, who wants to have a P where he knows it's rather stable sailing, to go into Tesla, where they think this can easily go down 50%, right? They see their downside risk much more than their upside potential. And so it depends to which investor you're addressing. So if you have a whale that's a very conservative value investor, That's probably still going to take some time. Tesla has to be in smoother waters and do at least share buybacks, maybe even consider one-day dividends and whatever, and just get slowly into that field. If you're talking to somebody who is currently an Apple investor or an Amazon investor and tell him, look, you've crossed the bridge to be a growth investor, you've believed in Apple, but see, Apple, this is now the 14 was obviously not a success story. What more do you expect? And do you think there will be so much more growth? Well, if you don't, how about this is the moment to switch to Tesla? I think that moment is coming. And I think that moment is actually currently the case. And that's actually my case for Warren Buffett. Rather than staying in a stock like Apple with that part of their portfolio, I think they're at nearly 40% now, do half and half. Do half of that into Tesla, which gives you all the upside of the growth, and keep the other half of that part still in Apple if you still believe there.
Yeah, I mean, with the growth situation, I mean, back to the, if they're not using it, when I first got an iPhone, uh, nobody had one. I got one the first day it was available. Um, people didn't understand what they were looking at. They thought that, they didn't even understand when I showed it to them, and they would touch the screen. They were like, "This is what? How does this even?" It was like magic. Their eyes would light up. They get a big smile on their face, just like when you see somebody first see a Tesla and try a Tesla, and it really is. You have to try it to believe it, kind of thing. I think in my experience with Tesla, and also there may be some investors who may have been inside of an older Tesla, maybe back in 2014 or whatever, and they haven't experienced a 3 or a Y, so they don't really know. Because I experienced one of those early Teslas, and it wasn't as impressive as where they are now. Obviously, there's a different feeling to it now. It feels way more like a spaceship than back then. So I think it's a much more refined product. But regarding you were saying about sorry,
the stock price.
The stock. Oh, about dividends or buybacks. I really felt like when he mentioned on the call 5 billion to 10 billion, it sounds nice if the net income is really, and the revenue is really improving as we think it might, or we think it will. I just think that they should have just I mean, it sounds nice, but if I've talked to you about this before, I think it should be something around 500 million or a billion. They can keep it going every couple quarters or every whatever, every 6 months or something, and that way they have room to bump it up as they move.
Yeah.
Whereas going to 5 or 10 billion, if it just stays at that amount for a while as they continue growing, it doesn't show growth in buybacks. Or I mean, or what if they have to stop, or where they can't do it for another 2 years or something? Something about it is not as, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's whatever. And he doesn't really like dividends, so I don't expect that right away.
I mean, there's clearly, there are two elements to it which are not logical, but very important. The one is it shows the current stock price is too low. Management thinks the current stock price is too low. And I think they do believe that. I do be, I'm very convinced that at the 200, where were we, 214 level, this is ridiculously cheap, given their ambition for the next couple of months and years. The second to it is also giving back to retail investors. It actually has two signals. We're not issuing further debt. We're rather bringing it back. So this would cancel in this size that they announced. This would cancel the 2020 issuance, the two they did in September and December 2020, which I think is a nice thing. We're just back to the size of a pie before that, before the S&P inclusion happened and whatever, and we all have our little stake in that. And then don't forget, in the meantime, there was lots of issuance for his stock-based compensation and for new employees. So the pie has been growing more than the stock issuance the retail investors and for the institutional investors. So I think it's a nice gesture to give back, and I do believe that's their intention. I don't think Elon thinks in, okay, we show Wall Street we're grown-ups now. I don't think that's his way of thinking at all. And I don't think he should. But I think it's the other two. It's the price is really cheap rather than doing, I don't remember the number. I think they had 990 million at the moment
Almost a
in
billion.
treasury
Yeah.
bills, right? In similar. That's silly. I mean, I'm not saying it's, but it is, right? Why?
It goes back to what you said earlier that you don't really like treasury bills.
I don't.
They're boring. They're boring, but they are safe.
Sure. And I have to say, given Elon's capacity of taking risks, because I mean, come on, who else in the world is taking risks like him? He is a very prudent money manager with his company. He really is. And I think it comes from the learning curve of having been so close to going bust, right? And I think that teaches you to be very cautious afterwards.
Okay, the last question, and you knew this one was coming.
Oh my God. Ready? I didn't know that was coming, but go ahead.
Yeah, when you hear it, you'll realize this one was coming.
Oh.
Tesla stock price. Is it a steal and why?
I should have known this one is coming. You're right. It is a steal. I mean, there's no doubt that 200 is just too cheap for what it is, especially everything we know. I'm currently working with some people on an article about what the Inflation Reduction Act will do to Tesla. And I mean, we all want to be very prudent not to be seen as pumping the stock or celebrating that we're getting government money, right? We don't want that image, and that's not Tesla's motivation. But there are billions coming back in the next couple of years from the US government. This bill is really very favorable in lots of ways to Tesla. So if they execute, and there's absolutely no reason not to believe that they won't execute, Tesla is a steal.
Awesome. And I also, on that subject about government subsidies and such, the jobs that Tesla is creating, the good paying jobs.
So deserved. But I mean, well, you know what is going to come. Can you hear them already? I mean, come on.
And those people are paying taxes. Those jobs are paying taxes as well.
Sure.
And it also contributes to the GDP of the country. There's so many things, and I don't understand how they can worry about small subsidies in comparison to oil and gas, obviously.
Sure, that's exactly the subject, no doubt. But I mean, it will come anyway, and we'll just fight the FUD as we do, and we've always done.
Okay, well, this was my first show. Thank you for allowing me to interview you. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. It was great to see.
This is hopefully I'll do it closer to sunset or earlier in the day so we can get a better background for more of the next interview. But thank you so much for answering all those questions.
Let me ask you, can you actually see the stars there? Because I feel there's, or is it just a light?
There's a lot of clouds tonight, but usually, yeah, you can see lots of stars. It's not like Wyoming or Colorado where you can really see the Milky Way or whatever, but yeah, usually you can see lots of stars here.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And sometimes there's fireworks. It's a really beautiful place, honestly.
Good. Well, I'm pleased you're there, and I'm pleased you had me. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you a lot of success with your YouTube channel.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.